Jai Hind, Jai Bharat, and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Adi Achint. China is the flavor of the season. A lot of things are happening in China, and we need to understand where is Xi Jinping taking this country. There was an expose, if I may, about the Chinese virus that came out a couple of days ago, which I will discuss with you, and I will also tell you what is Xi Jinping worried about. What I read of him is that there is a lot of worry within China to kind of, sorry about that, but to kind of stabilize a bit. The Chinese seem to be a little desperate to keep the country together, and that is quite interesting to me. I'm not saying they're in a situation like Pakistan, but they do have issues. Let's try and understand what those issues. Let's take away all the muck from all the rubbish and actually see what's happening inside China. I've, the story will always be from inside China. A lot of us try and analyze China with its foreign affairs and stuff like that, but I believe the story of China speaks from within. First of all, thank you so much for joining in, and that's my Jai Hind, Jai Bharat on the chat to everyone. And of course, do like this video, subscribe to the channel, spread the message to your friends, anybody else who enjoys watching geopolitics as much as we all do in this particular group. You can contribute to the Dev Talks efforts by just scanning the QR code right here directly to me, becoming a member, or sending us a super sticker or a super chat. Let's begin with what's happening inside China. Of course, as usual, I have some slides for you. Now, I'm going to run through a lot of the news based slides, and these are just FYI. We won't spend too much time on each slide because there's quite a bit of them that I've collected together that I want us to build a picture of what is happening inside and where is the Chinese Communist Party taking this country. The question I'm asking is the CCP losing control? And that's something that we need to find out. Of course, I don't at all say that they will lose control and China will break up and this and that. But when you see certain things happening inside China and how Xi Jinping seems to be tightening the noose on the Chinese people, that tells you something which is actually not being told by the Chinese Communist Party. Now, this is just a news. It irritated me quite a bit, so I just put it up here. Nothing against women or anything else, but if you look at it, this is what the UN says. There's a whole load that is happening in China with regards to Uyghurs, with regards to Tibetans, and with regards to a whole lot of other things. But the UN is concerned about lack of women in China's top government. Uh, I mean, women must be part of the government. There is no question about it. Absolutely, there has to be, equal opportunity. But I think the UN can spend a little more time looking at the whole lot of nonsense that the Chinese are up to within their country and outside. But in any case, I mean, let's just leave it there. Now, the lab leak. This is the most interesting thing that actually came up. The lab leak, everybody's been saying that the Chinese Wuhan Institute of Virology released this virus on purpose or not, God only knows. Uh, but the top scientist in China says, I don't rule out the lab leak. This is interesting. His name is, let me just get this QR code out of the way so that we can read a little better. Yeah, so his name is Professor George Gao, and he did a podcast with the BBC guys. It's called Radio 4 Podcast, Hunt for COVID's origin. And he actually said, you always suspect anything. That's science. Those don't rule out anything. The world leading virologist, and he's not just another guy on the street and stuff like that. This guy is renowned around the world, right? And he also says that Chinese government may have taken up the lab leak theory more seriously than its official documents actually claim. He says that there was a formal investigation, but I kept my team a little away from it. We all know why. You get close to certain things in China, you probably find yourself in some camp somewhere in Xinjiang or something like that. So he kept his team away, but he's aware there is something which is happening. And as a scientist, he's actually openly, for the first time, a Chinese scientist has come out and said that I do not rule out the lab leak. And that is very interesting, considering the factor that there has been a report which has been submitted to the US Congress as well, talking about a similar line of story. The Chinese are also going through something called debt. It's terrible inside. Now, this is a photograph and a video, as a matter of fact, on the 31st of May, which is today. Don't ask me how I got it. This is in Yangzhou, in front of an Evergrande building, where this Evergrande, we all know, is sunk to the ground. They were supposed to pay a certain amount of money, didn't give. People started protesting. Remember, one thing in China which is very interesting is that these protests are becoming more and more regular. People have realized the power of a combined protest when it actually takes place against a particular authority, and that's very interesting to me. Look at this. This is, of course, written in Mandarin and in Chinese. I can't read that, but of course it is. I got it translated and understood. It says this is the debt, the hidden debt which is there. The home of the coronavirus, Wuhan, which has a debt of about 629 billion yuan. That is about $88 billion, a debt ratio of about 552%. The second place is in Guangzhou. So now these are debt which is not shown, right? The Chinese kind of have two types of debt: one that they show to people, and one they kind of keep at the back. And the debt which is there of the local governments is never shown to people. The trouble is that this particular debt is now trying to seep out, right? Some people put it at a figure of about $18 trillion with regards to its internal debt. So one doesn't know what exactly and how much pressure it is putting on the Chinese economy. But these things can actually give you quite a good idea of what is happening. China's Apple loss is India's gain. Remember, this is a big shift, right? Tesla is also doing the same thing. As a matter of fact, Elon Musk is in China right now. I'm sure the Chinese are telling them, "Na karo, hey, don't do this. Don't go to India. Apple वैसे ही चलेगा यार. तू भी चले जाएगा तो कैसे चलेगा?" So China is feeling the pinch with regards to certain business, and I'm not going to say a lot. Certain stuff that is coming into India, and of course certain stuff which is going into Vietnam, Malaysia, Japan, and a whole lot of other places. But China is feeling that particular pinch. It also urged Japan, and remember the word, urges Japan to stop imposing chip export controls. Remember, the US put chip export controls, and the Netherlands told the Chinese, listen, the machines you use to make chips, we're not going to give it to you anymore. Today, the Japanese and probably the South Koreans are the only source for the Chinese to get some sort of chips. Now, it's also saying we are willing to work with Japan to promote practical cooperation in key economic and trade areas. It tells you they're on a certain back foot with regards to chips. Now, the active factory activity, of course, when the Chinese opened up after COVID, they said, oh, we are booming 5%, 10%, 12% growth. After actually the dust settled down, it shows that the factory output has actually slowed. There are two, three reasons for it. One is, of course, the lack of money within the world. India, Saudi Arabia, very few countries in the world that are actually showing a growth. Germany's gone down the tube with a official actually recession. Now, Europe is a big market for China, right? So if Europe is now going to be a little strained in terms of money, you're going to have trouble, right? The Chinese will get directly impacted. Of course, Chinese are able to sell a lot of goods within Russia. One of the reasons why Indian goods are not able to reach there, because the Chinese are playing games there. But it still tells you, with all the efforts that the Chinese are making, their activity, factory output is slowing down. Another uh, uh, another parameter to match this is because the Chinese consume a lot of fuel, right? If their activities are full on, the kind of oil consumption and stuff like that is going to be really high. uh, when that happens with the cut of the OPEC market, which has reduced its production, you should have seen the oil prices skyrocketing, which is not happening. Remember, India and China are not small countries, okay? Both of us consume a lot of fuel. So when these two countries are in full swing and demanding, the consumption of fuel and the demand of fuel will be much higher. The prices will start going up. So I just want to spend a little time in telling this. It's not just one factor with regards to output. You can actually just look at the crude oil prices, and you can realize that Chinese have not been able to get their economy faster. This is very, 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 very dangerous. Again, there's a new COVID wave, the Chinese themselves say, and the CDC has put out a figure of about 65 million cases a week. Now that's a lot. That's a lot. A lot of Chinese social media talks about no lockdown. So they're already putting that word forward that no lockdown. We will figure it out, sort of a thing. Remember during this time, the last time the Chinese was trying to hunt out Indian medicines, because then they realized that a lot of Chinese people are bringing Indian medicines from Hong Kong. A lot of smuggling was happening during that time, and the Chinese had got a huge stock of medicines. But this is dangerous. This is a new strain, which can actually, you know topple out of control and put us all into trouble. uh, Chinese, at the end of it, it is something that they've done before. uh, in India, I don't think it's going to be that big a threat. We're all vaccinated, we're all herd immunity sort of a thing done. That's not the case with these guys. This is how China, this is how sensitive the CCP has become, right? They actually find stand-up comedian. Uh, you know, he was a small little company that was featuring this guy, and he made a joke on the military. He actually said something about, to basically he said, these two dogs were chasing out the squirrel, and he said that, when I looked at him, at these guys do this, I could remember the CCP slogan which Xi Jinping had said to uh, the the Chinese army: "Fight to win and forge exemplary conduct." He said these words. It got reported, and as a matter of fact, what has happened is he's been fined $2 million for this particular joke. His company has been shut down, and he has been actually put out and into investigation. That's how sensitive these guys are. you know corruption is a big problem within China. Uh, corruption actually came up to a point within China that Xi Jinping had to launch out a whole campaign, and I'll tell you why. There is this guy, I've taken an example of him. Lia Zhaomin, in 2018, he was arrested. He was an asset management company, also senior banking regulator. Now, when I say banking regulator, he was a banking regulator for the government of China. He owned 100 houses in which he had installed 100 mistresses. Yikes. The court judgment pointed out that most of his bribery had taken place after Xi Jinping had launched his most energetic anti corruption campaign in the nation's history in 2012. Now, ye bada interesting hai. Xi Jinping, as the strong man of China, launched a campaign and this and that and the other. And then you have this chap who comes around and says, Bhai Sahab, ye kya hai? The court came out and said 100 houses, 100 mistresses, and he who have actually given this guy one of the topmost banking regulator jobs in China. This is 6 years after Xi Jinping came in power. This is an interesting statistic that I dug up. There's a website called Statista which actually does a lot of statistics, and I keep a track with regards to quite a lot of stuff. बहुत कुछ मिल जाता है उसके ऊपर. You can see growth statistics, foreign exchange, ये वो and everything. But remember, this is they keep asking you for money, so you got to keep on doing the search again and again. That's one crack of the website. So this is year by year the conviction of CCP cadres for corruption, right? So 2011 it's about 153,000, and in 2018 it went up to 621,000. 2021 is 627,000 people. Can you imagine? 627,000 CCP people have been convicted. These are not the guys that have been charged or arrested. These are guys that have got sentences. 500,000 CCP cadre people are convicted in corruption. 500,000. That's a disease, right? China finds more than 1 lakh people under its anti corruption drive. 1 lakh people, straightforward, right? Fines have been issued right there. And in China, when somebody says fined, you don't have to go and pay. They just issue you thing, it gets debited from your account, and that's it. You make a mistake somewhere, your WeChat, this thing has your wallet connected to it. You make a mistake, you walk across somewhere or you take a wrong turn somewhere, it catches you, it debits your WeChat account, and takes off a little score from your social credit. That's how these guys are. Now they've received, can you imagine 231,000 acquisitions is something that accusations is something that they're working on. China jailed its Supreme Court judge to 12 years for corruption. कहाँ का Supreme Court judge? And the president, he keeps coming around and saying that the military must resist the corrosion of corruption. If a president of a country comes around and gives a very very clear cut statement to the CCP, but yeah, it is ridiculous, the kind of corruption which is actually taking place. Let's talk about food, which the Chinese seem to be running out of. Now, this is interesting. A superpower who can't feed itself. Xi Jinping says that the Ukraine war has shown extreme importance of food security. क्यों भाई सो रहे थे पहले यार? What has happened? अभी suddenly क्या हो गया? क्या हो गया is this. This is now a professor at the Zhejiang University in China itself. By the way, let me repeat myself. A professor at the Zhejiang University in China has written this article, and he says China's food security faces a hidden threat in aging countryside. We all know by now are pretty much aware that the Chinese uh, population is aging. Now, if your aging population is also doing your farming, the production output is going to be lower. And this is a graph that shows you, and this is basically uh, telling us the import dependence on cereals. Right, 2020, of course, the demands were low because COVID and all that stuff. But then it 1920, they had some sort of a appraisal, but then now you see the demand up to 5.1%. And why am I being so sure about it is because, let me show you this slide first. China orders 5,000 tons of cotton yarn. Of course, that is not food, but guess where they're ordering it from? Gujarat. That has to burn quite a bit. As a matter of fact, for the past 2 years, the Chinese have been buying rice from India. Right, let's get back to this thing now. Food security is an important foundation of national security. I'm not saying this, Xi Jinping is. He's also said safeguard grain security to protect farmland, to increase domestic production. Now, what is the challenge that CCP is facing is unemployment. So they're picking up these graduates, throwing them back into the villages, exactly what happened to Xi Jinping, throwing them back into the villages and saying, grow rice. They are wanting to increase the acreage of farming. Now, funnily speaking, last year they had rains in one part of the country, floods, and the second part of the country they had a complete drought. They've been trying to connect both the places to share the water because this happens quite regularly, but no cigar till now. My question is, when a Chinese Communist Party leader comes out and says something like this and he starts making open public statements, that means the things have actually become critical. Are they short of food, or they stockpiling for a bad incident that we know what I'm talking about? Is it a war stockpile, or is it actually so bad that they're not able to feed their own population? Local cadres being put into crosshairs so that they can be given targets. Now, this is a very simple thing in China. भाई तेरा ये काम है, तू इतना बनाएगा, इतना करेगा, इतना तेरे से चाहिए. We need this much production from you. So all these guys even fudge the figures and हो गया हो गया हो गया. Some bribery happens and that's just about it. But there's a problem, right? Food security, domestic seed industry is plagued by lack of innovation. Officials warn. This is not what I am saying. This is what the Chinese are saying. Now they can be lying. A lot of people may say, yeah, this may be Chinese propaganda. Fair enough. It may be Chinese propaganda, but it also tells you by the way that they're importing stuff and what they're importing, right? It is basics. Now, Chinese basics is rice. If you're importing rice, that means you're not able to even feed your basic stuff to your people. So there's a problem there, right? Okay, nets, as I told you, they're ordering cotton yarn from India. Now, this is very, very interesting. As I was telling you, increase of acreage. This Remnin University professor, also Zheng Feng Tian, he had said there's a lot of pressure which is being put to increase the size of the arable land. So they are actually calling it a green leap forward. Now, if you guys remember, a couple of weeks ago, me and General Ryan, we did a show where we asked the question: is the Chinese going through a second cultural revolution? And these green leap forward type words that come out, like phrases that come out, tells you that there is a huge amount of a campaign which is going around with regards to this. If you follow Chinese social media like I do, and don't ask me how, uh, you do see a lot of videos of plants being plucked off, crops just being removed because it's not part of the segment that needed to be sown at that time. So the Chinese are telling people rice, rice, and rice. I wonder what they're going to eat with the rice. But in any case, now you've got, the Hill reported that the US farmland is becoming a battleground in the fight against China. China owns quite a bit of farmland. Remember, China also owned about 10 or 12% of Ukraine's agricultural land. So that's why they've got a lot of interest in that war right there. They tried the same thing in Pakistan. They tried the same thing in Africa. It is all being done to ensure that they have a constant supply of food. Now, when we read this, okay, that there's a fight of US farmland and they don't want that to happen and this and that, and then you read this, just do a comparison of both these things. New US China soy center to share American agricultural expertise with Chinese farmers. काहे भैया? I mean, वहाँ एक तरफ तो you've got your ready battle carriers and all that stuff standing there, and now you're doing agricultural cooperation, huh? Sometimes I really don't understand USA. What are their priorities? Is this part of an agreement? Is this part of something that they can't avoid or something like that? Because look what's happening around. I don't know. People in China are in crisis. Unemployment is rampant. COVID crisis is coming in. Well, the unemployment ratio is about 20% for the youth. Now, in China, the youth is about 16 to 24, right? So 20%, one in four, one in five people don't have a job. And that's quite bad. This is quite a familiar sign in China. This is a lady who kind of she's standing on a bridge. You can imagine how desperate she is, right? And she's saying, I can't do business, I can't pay for all this stuff. uh and she wanted to jump off this bridge. Now this bridge has become quite a symbol in China. Like the bridge protest is quite a symbol in China, and this is not the only photograph I've seen, or not the only video I've seen. And she's got if you notice, she's got a loudspeaker in her hand and she's screaming and she's wearing that band. So there's a lot of showcase. It tells you the desperation, knowing very well what can happen to you after the CCP gets to you. uh, it's quite, and not just you. I mean, when you do something like that, they take care of your family. They do exactly what Pakistan is doing currently. Beijing is worried about the joblessness, and the Chinese children and all that stuff have found this old folklore that they're you know pushing across and showing their frustration that bhai kuch nahi hai, we don't have jobs, we don't have anything. And guys, remember one thing: in China, if you are 35 plus, you're like waste, because you're too old, you are not fit for this thing, and you don't have this thing, and you don't have that. People don't want to hire you. They want young under 35 guys who can run around, do more for them. Because after 35, you have a wife, you want to go out, you got this, you got that, you have pain here, you have pain there as you grow older. uh, so they don't want that. They just don't hire you. And that's the same for women. I mean, it's really sad that I have to tell you this, but in China, any lady or girl who's beyond 35 are known as leftover women who are not married anymore. Of course, that's not the case in larger cities and stuff like that, but in rural areas and in smaller cities, they're known as leftover women. They do these meetups with other people. They do a lot of these things where men and women get together and try and see if they can do something about their lives. Sad story, but yeah, that's how it is. uh, they're plucking land from the Tibetans, to make this hydropower project, and these are personal land, so they just come, take up, tuck, give you some money, and tell you to bugger off. That's how China operates. Military weakness, something that we've spoken about. I won't dwell too much into military weakness. Is not my strength. I've got a lot of, thankfully, God's grace, good, very, very smart veterans who support me and who educate me and who help me understanding this particular thing. We've done a lot of videos on this, but this was a, thing that I saw. It's a website called chilicommand.com. It's written by a Chinese dissident blogger who stays in Australia. Uh, he mentioned an incident which happened, and I'd like to read this out, which actually concerns us. Behind the Xinjiang military region are the two armies of the Western China Theater, the 76 and the 77. It was also during the Sino-Indian confrontation in the Spangur Lake. Now, of course, he doesn't know how to write Spangur. Spangur Lake area with south bank of Pangongso in 2020. Although the 88A main battle tank of the synthetic 6th division was on top for the first time, it was the second generation main battle tank that fell behind after being installed. Battle tanks cannot fight against the third generation main battle tank of the T90S deployed by the Indian Army. Therefore, China urgently transferred third generation main battle tanks T99A from the Don Siguan Brigade, having synthetic 62 Brigade of the 76 Army Group, and so on and so forth. Now, this is interesting that they were not able to field the right equipment during the standoff. So, what the hell were they doing planning it? We responded with whatever we had. We went up, we deployed and stuff. They had more time to plan. That means they didn't even know what equipment works or not. And that's one of the drawbacks of building an army too fast. This is another interesting news that came out. It is from NTD. NTD is New Tang Dynasty News. NTD also has a YouTube channel, which actually said that there is this vehicle, there, the armored vehicle, which was again deployed in Ladakh. It is called the Dongfeng. Uh, it's a copy of the Humvee and stuff like that. And they said that there was a rumor that actually came out of corruption, right? And this is what it said, that these guys had taken some money to get this vehicle approved and given to the PLA. About, I think, 2 or 3 thousand of these were given. Netizens actually commented, "It's not surprising at all, as I expected. The real reason why the CCP has been expanding its military in the recent years to build more armament is to get kickbacks. The CCP usually takes 10 to 20% kickbacks." Interesting, right? Securitization of everything. Now, this is which what will tell you what is. These were the problems I told you. What is Xi Jinping doing about these problems? Is right here. Tells China's national security chiefs to prepare worst case scenarios. So the bottom part I have actually translated through a Chinese document. I wanted to compare it with somebody else, and I found this in CNN, BBC, everywhere. Everyone has pretty much covered it. And he has said that we need to build up a national security risk monitoring and an early warning system, right? So he basically is talking about accelerating the construction of a national security risk monitoring and early management system so that they can counter the threats of tomorrow. Now he talks about AI and this and that, but he also talks about color revolutions, which is getting repeated again and again and again and again and again. Has Victoria Nuland been to China recently or something? Uh, these are the 16 security types, 15 securities that they find, which are the most critical, which has territorial integrity, military, this, that. This is the latest checklist or the latest segmentation of their security that they've come up with. And each one of these things has a whole chapter around. And if anybody wants certain details, let me know. I've got this whole amount of data with me. I keep reading through it, trying to make sense of what I can equate what is happening with in this particular chart. China shuts down 100,000 fake social media accounts and ramps up content cleanup. Now, interestingly, that with the kind of great firewall that the Chinese have, they still have a lot of fake news going on to their email addresses, their social media accounts. They've got a lot of what do you call, people actually putting across a lot of stuff, and they sometimes do find it quite difficult to control it. I have also noticed a couple of things that, when the Chinese citizens do talk on social media, they use codes, right? So they don't talk in straight Chinese. They use codes. So when you read it, you till the time you don't understand the context of that, you will not really pick up what they're saying. But they do use these codes, and it's very interesting. China is also barring thousands of citizens and foreigners from leaving their country. Why? Because when they leave the country, they take the money out, so they don't want them to go. You stay here. Plus, a lot of people are now debating what is the real population of China, and some people are saying it's below 1 billion. A little hard to believe, but even if it's around 1.1, 1.2, they're going to need the people to stay there. With an aging population, it's the youngsters that will be leaving the country. So that's quite worrying for the Chinese. Now, this is called the exit ban, and this has been propped up in front of Xi Jinping. Guys, I'm not going to read all this stuff because this is quite a lot of information. I'm trying to get to a certain point. By the end of it, if you guys want to read this, please do pause the video and you can go through all this stuff. They're putting these exit bans so that they can control the movement of their population. By the end, in the next couple of slides, you realize, uh, you know they are, this espionage thing is very, very interesting. They came up with this thing called the Espionage Act, which can be used and levied against anyone. So let's say a guy like me who's done these videos walks up inside China, under espionage, and they just put you in. Khatam kahani. You're blamed to be a spy, and you know what happens after that. Now, this is the anti-espionage law. April 26th, this thing was brought out. It basically encourages regular citizens to tell on each other, like, hey, sir ji, wo udhar pe na wo kar raha hai. So this is what they're trying to do with their citizens. Now, remember the joke-telling comedian who got jailed? It was not the government who caught him. It was one of the citizens who took a recording and posted it on Weibo, saying that I don't like what he did and this and that and this and that. Now, what happened to when something like that happens is, they first of all found this chap. They find him. They're probably going to jail him and stuff like that. And now they're going after the guy who posted this comment. Why? Because they say you have posted derogatory comment against the PLA on social media. So this is how the Chinese are. This guy, poor chap, he thought he was doing a great favor to the CCP, and he got inside. And this is very, very interesting. Journalists, dangerous. As a matter of fact, there's a big thing between India and China with regards to journalists. They're throwing out ours, we are throwing out theirs. I think it's safer for our journalists not to be there because they might just be tagged as spies. So it's very interesting. The biggest thing is they are wanting to keep a control of the people coming inside China, staying inside China for a little bit for work and everything like that, and keeping them pressed in, not to get any ideas to encourage the local Chinese and to do something stupid. 2023, it's bans. It comes to effect on the 1st of July. There's a huge uproar that is going to start in the next month. I've been reading about a whole toolkit which will be put into place in the mid of June sometime to kind of push China back on this particular thing. So it's going to be interesting to kind of to see how this toolkit plays out against China. Domestic security agencies are going through a massive purge. And it was this is a quote which a lot of the Chinese are saying, is to turning a knife blade inward. And I showed you how they turn the knife blade inward. More than half, 627,000 people have been convicted and jailed in 2021. 22 figures have not yet come out. So you can imagine what the Chinese are going through. Now, this is Xi Jinping trying to energize and trying to get a control of all these agencies. Remember, he's consolidating power. He's still consolidating power to become that one man who will control China. Exit bans are going to be very difficult for foreign nationals, and if I was anybody advising anyone, just don't go there. Just don't go there, because they might just, you know, don't even fly over them, and Hong Kong included. Uh, this is the most important thing which a lot of people in China talk about, and they're talking about the factor that, are we short of food? Are we short of food? Are we short of food? People who say stuff like that on Chinese social media, picked up, software updated, brought back. It's crazy, but the theory is that it can erode the legitimacy of the CCP. Why I say this is because in China, if there have been times when governments have fallen, one is the time when there's been a foreign invader, two is the time when they didn't have food, and three, when internally they kind of they have issues which are connected to the rest too. Food has been one of the causes for the dropout of previous ancient to even medieval Chinese governments. China, again, as I said, encourages its citizens. Remember, those of you who've kind of been abroad, studied abroad, you'll probably know this, that the Chinese citizens that are there are snooped upon. And we recently realized there were about 10, 12, 15 of these police stations in USA, covert police stations. So this is what the Chinese are doing to their own citizens. They keep them under check all the time. I don't know if you've noticed this chap called Uncle Roger. With that guy who used to do emotional damage sort of a thing. Those memes that he would make. Now this guy cracked a joke. Somewhere he's a U.S. citizen, I think, and he cracked a joke. Presidency, good boy, something, something. He did some funny thing, uh, but then his accounts in all Chinese social media was banned. He was banned. He's this, that. He's on the hit list. So this is what they do. They pick up, and he was roasting some Chinese chaps in there. I'm sure they have reported on him, and that is exactly what is happening. Can you imagine that kind of control? Why is he doing that kind of control? Is obviously because he's scared of something, and that's foreign companies are going to face challenges. The corporate firm due diligence means groups that its office was raided by police who detained 5 employees. You can just go in, pick up someone, and under. How do you fight this? You can't. So this is a dangerous thing. Right now, China introduces a new power structure to tighten control over data. This is what they say. What I say is this is to you know shift. He's basically got a lot of data with him. Now he's going to try and create an ownership for it, and you know do something with it, because at the end of it, it's the war of data. Let me just assure you, I personally am guilty of it. When WeChat suddenly came into India, everybody said, oh, WeChat dekho ye bhi. Those days WhatsApp was very new, so we all downloaded WeChat. Now I don't know what all the Chinese have taken of mine, because my phone has changed, number has changed, and this and that, even the city has changed, but he collected a certain amount of data on me as well. I don't know what else is he collecting through any of the Western apps. What are the back end agreements with these guys? We don't know. But at the end of it, the Chinese would try and use this information against the population of the world. Firewalls. This guy was sentenced for 7 days for installing Twitter, Telegram, and YouTube. Now, to all the Chinese who come to my channel and keep trolling, trying to troll, I mean, keep on doing it. I don't care. Keep writing messages. So there was this chap on one of the videos called F.C. I mean, it had a name like that. And he started saying this, that, Yevo, and all that. So I just asked him at a point of time, I said, yeah, does Xi Jinping know that you're using VPN? Because I remember some guy got punished for just downloading that stuff on his phone. So what I would recommend is be very careful. I said that, the guy never came back again. So guys, that's how you push away one of these trolls. You say VPN, you say Tiananmen Square, and this and that. Remember, his phone has a certain, you know, back end memory. So if he's going to type stuff like that on his phone, it'll remain somewhere. And if he gets caught with that, he's going to be in trouble. So these guys are very scared of these certain words. Now, I've been saying this. Xi Jinping has been saying this. He said this for the first time, as a matter of fact, recently in the SEO summit, which happened in Uzbekistan. He said that the West is trying to instigate color revolutions within China, and that is something that worries him. Color revolutions are interesting, and that's how the revolution in Ukraine happened. There's this Jasmine revolution. There's Rose revolution. There's this, that. The Ukraine one is known as the Orange Revolution. Japanese Jasmine Revolution is actually a protest that started a while ago in China, and I've covered that in the history of protests of China in my on my channel. If you guys want to see that, it's a very interesting show where I've talked about the various kinds of protests and the uh, sizes of the protests and how they do it and how are they communicating with each other considering the firewall. So I've gone into quite a lot of depth in that particular episode. Do watch that. It's there in the playlist China Watch. Now, this is what Xi Jinping is doing, right? He knows that he has to control everything, right? If he has somebody else, somebody will take power from him and stuff like that. So when he came in, he created something known as the CMC, the Central Military Commission. Okay, now what he did with the Military Commission is that he started creating these subcommittees which would report into the Central Military Commission, which he controls. Now, this is another commission, Central National Security Commission. It decides what it considers to be a national security threat, right? What all is there in this? Now, this is a part of the CMC, which is the Central Military Commission. What all is there as a part under it? You've got the military, you've got this, and recently some time ago he had also put the people's armed police within this. So external defense, national security assessment, and internal defense, all three under one committee with the chairman called Xi Jinping. Now, a lot of people talk about the Chinese defense budget. They say, yeah, oh, 220, $230 billion, yeah, wo, this, that. When I was doing a little digging, uh, 2007 they had a figure. 2020 they spent $140 billion on internal security. Guys, those cameras cost a lot. So from 225, if you remove 140, there's left with not much, 80-90 billion dollars. Right now, somebody will say, yeah, 80-90 billion dollars. India is $77 billion. They are building so many ships. Why can't we? Well, of course, the defense budget is never what is told. There are excesses. And the Chinese do something really smart with regards to their navy. What they do is they don't call it defense, they call it civil military fusion. So they'll create a civilian platform, build a defense ship on it, and move it forward. So this is something that they've been doing. If you remember that Chinese have 10,000 boats in a militia, these small little boats, they're not like ships and stuff like that, in a militia which go around and circle around people, and they harass people in the South China Sea and stuff like that. So they use this civil military fusion as a garb of their defense production. That's something that I wanted to talk about. But then you can see $140 billion spent on internal security. How much does China spend on security per person? You can see that's 3,500 yuan per person per year, right? So you can see which are the highest: Tibet and Xinjiang. Beijing, of course, to stop all these protests, but Tibet and Xinjiang literally take the cake. Now, this is, very, very interesting statistics with regards to the average spend, right, by the central and the local governments, right, per person. Okay, it's an average. So it tells you the concentration of China. Now, how does China control people inside? This credit score movement requires this credit score. If you block now, Chinese realize there's certain people coming for a protest, they'll make their credit their health passes red, so they can't enter anywhere because everything is electronic. So they're able to control you in that particular way. Plus exit bans. They won't give you a job. They won't get you insurance. They won't get you medical benefits. Nothing. Now, if your credit score falls, you got to do something to cover it up. How do you do that? If you're banned, Chinese pay money to the government, or the CCP becomes a vampire and starts taking blood to raise the credit score. Can you imagine that? Nothing wrong with donating blood. I promote it. I've done it multiple times on my own. But can you imagine? You want to go see your parents or your family somewhere who's far away and your credit score is low. You can't travel. So you go donate your blood, then your credit score goes up, and then you can travel. What fools. Smart looking officer, but facial recognition glasses. Facial recognition, protest signs. So if somebody stands with a banner, their faces will be identified. Tuck, 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 tuck. Credit score stopped. You block, tuck, tuck, sab kuch band. He'll be standing on a side without being able to enter his own house. That's the kind of surveillance that the Chinese are getting into. Now, of course, protesters, this is happening right now. Yunnan, there's a huge Muslim population there, which is fighting with the Chinese to stop them from removing the minarets of a mosque. I want to ask all these guys, freedom of religion and all that stuff. Why don't you say something to these guys? I want to ask our friends in Pakistan who are Muslim, who claim to themselves to be the most Muslims of the Muslims. Why don't they talk about this? They're getting thrashed. Their mosques are getting broken, but nobody in the world would say anything. Fight with religion. This is a why I brought this up, because I realized, Chinese Communist Party tells you, yeah, you can't believe in anything beyond the party. Now, since 1978, people have started going into this thing. I'm not going to read the entire thing, but just understand one thing: a lot of major religions are recognized within China. uh, the Hare Krishna community is a large community within the main cities of China, and there's a huge amount of Hinduism, holy, this, that, whole lot of things which are celebrated in China. So that's very interesting to me. Now, political significance of religion in a communist country is very, very interesting, because the question will always be asked in a believer's mind: who rules, God or the party? The party wants to be the god of the people, but they won't accept it, right? So this is very interesting, that there's going to be dissent with regards to religion, because the Chinese will say, no, this is how we do it in China. They will, bhaiya aise nahi hota yaar. And now that there's a globalized world, the Chinese people have traveled around the place, they know what's right. So this is a fight which is going to be inside Chinese believers, right? Not everybody would be a believer, but those who are, this will be a fight inside them, which is what brings you to this number of Chinese people seeking asylum. Just look at the graph going up. 120,000 people, right? Which are the destinations that they're going to? By the way, can you see India? Although not that up in the air or anything like that, but they're still coming here. 126,000 people in 2020. For what? I don't know. Now, I told you about Beijing, the Apple thing, right? May 24th, they posed an administrative penalty of 200,000 yuan. Now, 200,000 for Apple is nothing, right? They said false advertisement, this chip, that chip. There's a story there if you want to read it. M1 chip is there in MacBook Pro, claimed to be the fastest chip, but there's another chip who's faster than this. You pay me 200,000. I mean, my question to these guys is, how will you get investment like this? You ban foreigners within your country. I think about 600 foreigners are banned currently in China, if I'm not mistaken. You ban foreigners and then you expect to get, have peaceful relations with those guys. Xi Jinping, this is a speech. I'm trying to remember about what, I think 2 months ago, he gave this speech to, he was traveling somewhere and he gave this speech. It's not coming to me right now, but I'll tell you. No, he said that COVID-19 was a major test of China's system and capacity of government. How does this connect to what we are talking about, securitization? Because COVID-19 was the time when they were able to actually implement all the health codes very easily. Vaccine codes, health codes, ye codes, wo codes, they could control the population. Right? So they actually used it to their advantage. Now I'm going to ask, is the CCP using control? Last two slides. Things are tight. There's no question about it. And that's the first thought that came to me. When I sat down in a clear head and I said, are they in trouble? I won't say trouble, but things are tight. If they do go down this path, they will be in trouble, right? The mountain of known and unknown debt, we spoke about that. How much do these local governments earn? Now, the revenue system of these local governments is very simple. You sell, you don't sell. The state owns everything. You lease land and then you get paid for it, and that's your income, right? And remember one thing: the tax paying. A lot of people crib about democracies. China is no great in terms of taxes. A lot of the people don't get that much money, right? So there's a problem here. If your real estate market is falling, how do these local governments earn? And if they're not earning, but they're spending as much on infrastructure and COVID and yay and woe and all that, how will they sustain themselves with already a huge mountain of hidden debt? Right? Everybody in the West thought, and this is the biggest deception that the Chinese have played, and it's fantastic. Even today, a lot of these Chinese apologists, that I listen to a lot of the times, and you wonder what are you smoking, man? They, oh, no, Chinese just want to do economic work. They don't want to do anything to anybody. They're just wanting to earn money and this and that. Well, that's what they've been telling us for 40 years. But economic reforms did not bring in political reforms. They never want to. If they brought in political reforms, the first guy who's going to be booted out of Shanghai's ocean floor would be Xi Jinping. And the entire CCP would be the small splash going into the river after him. They, everybody talks about China being an authoritative country. I say they're going from authoritarianism to totalitarianism. If Xi Jinping wants control of everything, that is total, chairman of everything. But having said that, the Chinese have learned how to protest. And I'd really urge all of you guys, please watch that show on the protest. It's I mean, I think one a lot of the some of the best research I've done about China. Chinese people know, okay, if we do protest in this particular way, the voice will reach. They do send out these things into Telegram, they do send out into Signal, they're there on Twitter. So these videos do surface, which was not the case before. They want to concentrate a lot on internal security because they know there's a challenge. Today in India, there's a challenge in Manipur. And by the way, I got to know some very interesting factors about that and the help that some parts are coming in, some stuff which is coming in from our friend here. I will, I'm getting some more information and I have proof. So we'll figure it out. But in any case, there's a challenge in internal security. Like we have a challenge in certain parts of our country and we acknowledge it. Yeah, there's a challenge. We need to sort it out. They don't like to do that because they call themselves the most harmonious society. Han Chinese, हम तो सबसे दोस्त हैं, ये हैं, वो हैं. Tibet, India started talking about Buddhism like nobody's business. And if there's one thing that the Chinese are worried about is Tibet. You can see that with the amount of money they spend in controlling that place, right? So you've got Xinjiang. Of course, there's a problem. When I spoken to the prime minister in exile, Mr. Saleh Hudayar, he's based in New York. I have done a show with him to watch that. He tells the heartbreaking story of East Turkestan. When you look at what happened in the G7, the shift is very clear. Everybody said China, 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 China. Russia was ठीक है Russia. China. Is there some sanctions in the off point? Is that why they're giving India a NATO plus so that we dangle this and you dangle that and we work this out? I'm going to do a show on that as well. And as I always say, that the story of the damage to China would not be coming from outside. It will be from within China. This is something that I read in a book and I, just put it out there. I wanted to, make you understand why China behaves the way it does. Because they cannot afford to appear weak or indecisive at home. They may feel compelled to act strongly and forcefully abroad. What Mao did, what Xi Jinping did, especially given the popular nationalism the party state has fostered since 1989. In fact, this phenomenon is a reasonable explanation for the emergence of China's combative wolf warrior diplomacy. Would come out yak 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 yak. I mean, literally, short of abusing, say whatever they wanted to every country and just walk off. So this is a very interesting. philosophical thought about China, and I will try and cover that with someone who understands the philosophy of China. My question to Mr. Xi Jinping, and I'm sure you're hearing, or one of your little pinks are hearing me. I want you, little pink or the Wamo, to ask Xi Jinping, does he really have the heavenly mandate to rule? What is this whole business of the heavenly mandate to rule? Heavenly mandate to rule talks about the fact that the Chinese Communist Party has been mandated from heaven to rule China. The Middle Kingdom syndrome, if you guys may just, if I may just take it forward a little bit and say that they think that, oh, China is the one which is there in the center of the world and everybody else are idiots around them. And the CCP is the center of the world for China itself and has the legitimate right, guided from heaven, to rule over China. This is a story that I wanted to tell you. What's happening inside China: COVID, economy, unemployment, weak military, excessive excessive internal security, excessive controls over its society, right? This is all signs of an internally weakening state. Of course, I can't tell you for certain is the CCP losing power or not, but the sheer factor that they're trying to consolidate power tells you that there's something wrong. Let's get into your questions, guys. Before I do, like, subscribe, do share this video with your friends and any other China watchers. And I would love to hear your comments. You can contribute to the Dev Talks efforts with this QR code right here. You can become a member or send us a super sticker, super chat. Raghunandan, you say I have my reservation about SARS virus outbreak in 2002. That virus was used to base it for gain of function. How? What is your view on it? Yeah, I've heard this theory, brother. I'm not much of a microbiologist, but I've heard this theory. Quite possible, yeah. But one of the things that SARS didn't have that this thing had was transmissibility. If you remember, SARS infected what 8,600 people and about what 80, 90 died. It was a 10% death rate, but it didn't have this kind of transmissibility within this thing. But your thought process with regards to gain of function, to tests done to increase that transmissibility, well, it's quite possible. Prasad, you say, I'm sure China is breaking into pieces and will not be possible nearby. Absolutely not. If this happens, it's a good sign for India. My assumption is breaking China will help India to gain UN Security Council member. Well, let me just take these questions two separate, right? I'll answer it in two separate spaces. I would never say that any country is breaking. No, I don't even think Pakistan will break down. As long as the army is standing there, they have those stupid nuclear weapons, they're not going to break, right? One odd place here and there, they might just lose control, but they're not going to break. China, remember, yeah, whatever said and done, fake economy, this, that, they still, I believe they're about 8, 9 trillion, 10 trillion, most likely, but that's twice us. That's a lot of money. And they have a lot of reserves in terms of the US and stuff like that. But the game is very simple. India needs to figure out its own space, China or no China. Security Council, if it is not going to behave properly, we need to create a power center of our own. And that's something that we must do. We have to start talking about this in order to showcase that, listen, we're not some joker standing on the road anymore, right? Siddharth says, with the control over the social and the general media, how do people communicate and interacting for these purposes? It's a very interesting question. Yeah, they found ways. They write behind closed doors and stuff like that. During the protests, they found a very interesting thing. They realized that if you keep your Bluetooth on and you keep your AirDrop, as in iPhone's AirDrop, as everybody finding, you could send messages to people without any trace of it being around, because AirDrop is, it doesn't trace who it came from. But the CCP got wise of it, and they actually Apple and said no more airdrops in our phone. So they're quite crafty, they'll find a way. I'm quite positive of it. During the protest, they would use these white papers and they would keep it in front of their face. White paper didn't have anything written, so no handwriting analysis, no nothing. Keep it in front of your face so that the facial recognition is not happening. So this is something that they've learned, and I said that they've kind of uh, learned about this. Ma'am, you say, I read somewhere Xi Jinping gets furious and punishes if he is called Winnie the Pooh. You know, it's banned in China. You can't say Winnie the Pooh. You say that on social media, they'll ban you, and there's probably a I think a shaza or something like that. Some punishment will be there. So you're absolutely right. CCP collect bribe dollar in the cash, and move their children move the cash around to other countries. All these CCP children's countries study in the West. Somewhere I think, China is a bit more developed Pakistan. They have no interest in China. All these they want to run. बच्चों को बाहर ये बाहर ठीक. Who will want to stay under that? Kumar, you okay? You asked a very interesting question. Is there any chance for the Shanghai Group to overthrow Xi? Not at the moment. Unless something really big happens, you can't actually do a coup without a reason. You got to have something. What do you rile up the people against? You just can't walk in and say, okay, it's a coup, get out. You can, but it's difficult in China, right? Ask, what is the actual Chinese GDP? Some people are saying that they've not even recovered after COVID. Saab, I think their GDP is not more than $9 trillion. They claim about 16 or $18 trillion. I don't think it's beyond nine. Srinivasan, you're asking, China is probably the only country that spends more on internal security than external. The whole country is a glorified jail with aggressive surveillance of its own people at the bedrock. Sir, you made a very interesting comment. See, the deal with the Chinese are they need to control the people because there's that sacred pact that they have with the people that we'll give you everything, you give us your freedom. Now the Chinese people are saying, यार तुमने दिया तो था ठीक है, अब प्राइसेस प्रॉपर्टी प्राइसेस गिर गए हैं, खाना नहीं है हमारे पास, कोविड हो रखा है, मेरे को तुमने 2 साल से घर में बंद कर रखा है, काहे का डील जो तुम्हारे साथ करा था. So that question is being asked, and let me assure you, this is being asked quite strongly on social media. They do write it, they get reactions, delete the post, but they do write, right? Asks, Xi's action are very, very bad for China. Could he secretly be trying to destroy the CCP and the country? Maybe revenge for his farm work during the youth. Yeah, if he's that sadistic, yeah, brother, I congratulate him and wish him all the best. That's all I would say. But I kind of don't think so. Remember one thing: these dictatorships are damn good to the leaders till the time the leaders are straight. The minute the leaders go a little bit, they get something known as the 75 treatment. It's known as the 75 gum in the back of the head, where the skull is not there. East Europeans used to do that as an execution style. So, Dravanian chimp. Will the Chinese push for increasing agriculture produce because more rift with India over water sharing or increasing water storage capacity will be enough for such clashes? You know, India, a lot of people claim that a lot of Chinese can control the movement of rivers and this and that. The, I won't say yes and I won't say no. There is some truth to that, but there is some untruth. There is some propaganda as well in that. But the problem is that they can try to increase their agricultural produce by using better seeds, by increasing their arable land. But two three things, their arable land is very less as it is. China has always had these problems in history as well. But the factor is, if you're not able to control this, eh, after a certain crop, the farmers are not going to be able to produce it because there's no inflow. So currently, if the stocks are higher, the prices will fall, and if the stocks are lower, the prices will rise. Now, where would you want to keep yourself into? And that's a big problem for the Chinese. They need it, but if they put it, there's one backlash that the farmers may lose money, and the other side of it, if they don't, then they have food insecurity, right? So there's a problem. There's a big problem with regards this. Now, increasing water storages with regards to India is a good idea. I think you need to desilt a lot of these rivers so that you can clear up and keep that kind of storage. But in any case, Brahmaputra is not a singular river. It's multiple little river systems that join in and form that beautiful Brahmaputra delta, and it goes into the mainland India before turning into Bangladesh. A lot of people think that it comes from one point in Arunachal and it just flows. No, it doesn't. It's an added onto river by a lot of the rivers in the east, namely Lohit and many other rivers which actually go into the Brahmaputra, right? And you have only financial and technical development will be respected with China. We have to work hard and grow fast as them, not as them, not like them. Our growth has to be sustained. Our growth has to be sustainable. Our growth has to be well thought out. What the Chinese did is super fast growth. For example, their bullet trains. Now they made bullet trains goes up to 600 kilometers an hour or whatever the speed is, but the problem is that it cannot carry weight, right? So when you only carry passengers, you need to have the train full so that you can make maximum amount of money. Now if the passengers are less, there's a problem because not everybody stays close to them. So there's an issue, and the Chinese have not been able to figure this out, and they're losing about 1.2 billion dollars a year on these the Beijing Shanghai line itself. So that's a silly thing. They built up quite fast without thinking whether they'll need it or not. So, but I take your point, Bennett, that we need to develop an infrastructure, we need to do it all these things, but we need to do it our way. Thank you so much, guys, for watching through this particular thing. I hope I'm going to do these China watches more regularly so that I can create and I can help create a certain amount of discussion about China, which is very seldom had because of the over obsession that we've got with Pakistan, self included. Pakistan has been interesting in the past some time. This show I've been planning for about 2 weeks that I've been wanting to do this. Uh, Imran Khan keeps playing dirty. I thought today was a nice quiet day. Let me just stick with this and go forward. It's a very, very interesting situation in China. We need to watch what is going to happen, especially the time when Xi Jinping might just come into India. And it is very interesting that they're trying to, they're putting out statements with regards to the Indian parliament that we emotionally stand with India with regards its efforts of decolonization. There was an interesting Global Times article. Search it out. You'll read it. It'll be quite as well fun. Srinivasan, you say, will do a research on China and Afghanistan. Yeah, I will do that. China and Afghanistan is an interesting subject. They're trying to bribe their way through. How far will they be able to do it is something that we'll have to see. In any case, I'm going to sign off now. Thank you so much for joining in, guys. Till next time. Jai Hind.